Welcome to Priority Traffic Podcast, where I strive to inspire and empower individuals to prioritize their wellness, create sustainable habits, and build a thriving lifestyle. I'm your host, Chris. Each episode, we discuss personal growth and resilience building techniques to help you excel in your profession and in life. We'll explore insights and actionable strategies for overcoming challenges on and off the job. My mission is to promote holistic wellness and performance while helping you become your best self daily. I aim to foster continuous improvement with clear, evidence-based guidance. Whether you're a veteran firefighter or just starting out, let's make Priority Traffic Podcast your go-to resource for wellness and high performance. Thanks for tuning in and enjoy this episode of Priority Traffic Podcast. Eric, welcome to Priority Traffic Podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. Excited to be here, man.
No problem. So I really want to have you on to dig into your training philosophy, get to know you, get your background a little bit. The Westside conjugate or the Westside barbell conjugate tactical stuff is super interesting to me. I think there's a lot of firefighters out there who would benefit kind of understanding how that program works, how that philosophy can help them. I do have a bunch of questions about what it means to be a Georgia smoke diver and how that impacted you into your career. And you know, it's something that not a lot of people have, but a lot of people talk about. And then, you know, just some injuries or obstacles that you've had to overcome and what it means to be a firefighter in your life, balancing the coaching, the private stuff, and then, you know, how you're doing. But first, let's dig into your background. And do you mind giving everybody a little introduction, how you got here, who you are, and where you work?
Yeah, man. I'll try to simplify it. It's been a long and a fun journey to kind of get where I've been. I've done things. I've been able to travel the world. Years ago, I was a professional snowboarder. I trained with the U.S. Project Gold team and was on the pro tour, I think, about 6 years.
Wow.
I ended up retiring from that in 2009. I lost my World Cup spot in 2009 and decided to kind of call it there. After that, I ended up going to school. I went to Boise State, and I grew up playing ice hockey my entire life.
Cool.
So when I retired from snowboarding, I had a hard time just being a student. You know, I'd been an athlete pretty much my entire life, and man, I just wasn't fulfilled. I don't know what it was, but I took some advice from a coach, and he just said, "Hey, man, like you should try to walk on to a hockey team. Like it'd be a waste to throw all this away."
Yeah.
You know, and so ended up going to Boise State. I got recruited to play ice hockey there.
Nice.
I got a degree in exercise physiology, and you know, I wanted to be a physical therapist. I've been injured so many times and had so much physical therapy that I thought, you know, I'd make a good physical therapist. But yeah, so I graduated. I played 4 years of hockey there, and then graduated. And then kind of at the last minute, you know, I wasn't really happy with where the physical therapy thing was going, and decided, you know, I wanted to really focus on being a strength and conditioning coach. And so I opened up a gym, and at that time I was with my girlfriend, and that was going well. And she kind of, we were looking to pivot and do some other things. And I was looking at going into the Army.
Okay.
I was getting ready to sign like an 18X contract, so to go special forces. And when I told her about it, she wasn't very thrilled. She was like, you know, I think you'll be great at that. I just won't be here when you get back. And I was like, all right, well, what would you stick around for? And she's like, you know, you've always been interested in the fire service. You know, I'd shared that with her, you know, for a long time. Had a lot of good friends in the fire service, and I always talked about wanting to do that. And you know, she mentioned that, and I said, "Is that something you'd stick around for?" And she said, "Yep." And so I made a call to my buddy Frank, and I just said, "Hey, man, I'm selling my gym. Want to get in the fire service? Can you help me?" And I think within like 2 weeks, he had a whole posse of people up to my house. I was living in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho at the time, and they packed my whole house up, moved me and my girlfriend down there, and just put everything into getting on the job. My girlfriend, myself, and my 2 dogs moved into his house. You know, got my NT, did all the things, and to make this long story, hopefully shorter. I now ride the back seat on Frank's engine, and I work for the city of Nampa. And that girlfriend is now my wife, and we've got 2 kids. So I'd say that, it all worked out the way it was supposed to.
Heck yeah, man.
So here we are.
Dude, that's pretty cool. The experience with snowboarding, that's probably a pretty high level operation, right? Like you're competing at a pretty high level. I guess my question is, what skills from that high level, competitive, high risk job, being a snowboarder like that, do you think serve you the most in your
Probably like training. So, this one, I developed this like just love for the process, right? And which has become such a trademark thing, like a catchphrase.
Sure.
But back then, you just, for snowboarding, it was training. I was on snow, probably 200 days a year. You're traveling the world. I was, training with the national team, and everything was very focused, and everything was geared towards like getting better, and all your resources were put towards, this end goal, right? Which mine was to win Olympic gold. And to do that, you maybe only compete like such a fraction of the time, right? But the majority of your time is training, so that like when, you do get your shot, you're ready to go, right? Yeah. I mean, does it sound familiar? It's like for the fire service, it's like you spend a career training for, none of us are getting, I'm still yet to meet anyone that says they're getting too much fire, right? I think everybody wants more jobs. So you spend the majority of your time training for, when that call comes in, and so I think that, the time snowboarding and really being dedicated towards a craft like that shaped me in the way that I probably approach the fire service the same way. It's the majority of my time is spent training, so that when the call comes in, all my resources have been dedicated. So when that happens, it's like, you win your Olympic gold that day, for lack of a better term, right? And so you're ready. So I think that really formed kind of the foundation on how I prepare for the job and really how I think about it.
Nice. So you go in from snowboarding, hockey, and school, and you start digging into, physical fitness. And what, had you always wanted to do that? Is that something you were always curious about? Yeah.
So I was training. I was living in Alberta at the time, and I was training with the Canadian national team. We had kind of an interesting, really cool environment up there, where it was an international group of young riders, and we were all trained together up at the Canadian Olympic Park. And our strength and conditioning coach, this guy Scott Wilgris for the national team, he was really my first introduction into probably what a strength and conditioning, like a real strength and conditioning coach is. And I loved like the training. He always had these things like, hey, I want to test this and test that, and that was kind of my first introduction into that. And I think I probably enjoyed like the training more than anything. And I asked him like, man, how do you get into this field? Yeah. And so he was a good mentor to me. And that was probably what gave me the real itch, or the interest in the science and practice of strength and conditioning. And so when it came time to go to school, like that's what interested me. I want to take my experience as an athlete and then train other athletes. Sure. And, I just always enjoyed that, learning about that process and the testing, and kind of a nerd when it comes to that stuff. So.
Yeah, I can relate to that. When you say enjoy the process, and then I hear you say enjoying learning, it just, that just makes me think that likely we align on the core value of being a lifelong learner.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I think the fire service is one of the greatest places to just continue to learn about yourself, other people, and sharpen that stone. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, there's no shortage of like like the evolution of what we're learning, especially through like science and studies with fire behavior and those things, new kind of tactics, or I don't want to say new, but like things are getting improved on, and we're learning better ways to do things. And then like the stuff that happens on a day-to-day basis, it's like, one of my buddies, Dave, that I work with, he always says it. He's like, you can't make this up, man.
Right.
Because it's just like you show up and you're like, wow, I've never seen this before. We got to figure it out, and it was just a few weeks ago. We had there was a car drag racing on the street. It was like 9 a.m. on a Sunday morning. And, the call came in as a 1050 unknown vehicle into a house, and so they show up and they're like, what's the address? We can't seem to find it. And so he's doing his 360 and like looks up, and the car is on the house next door. And he's like, go ahead. And he just starts dispatching all the resources. Yeah. And this car had been drag racing, lost control, hit like a little 3-foot like landscaping embankment, and launched over the house and landed on the roof next to it. And like in that moment, they had to figure out like where, in what book or in what academy did they teach you specifically for that, right? And so, man, our people had a great response. This car had been doing, I think, well over 100 miles an hour
easily.
And so they in that moment had to put together everything that they have formerly like known, whether it was in a book, in a class, and then also combine that with experience to come up with like how to solve that problem. Yeah. And that's every day, not a car on top of a roof, but like, I mean, every call you're just putting together information that and if you aren't constantly learning, man, like you're going to fail somebody because they expect us to be able to show up and solve that problem. Right. And so, the need to be a lifelong learner, especially in the fire service, I think that's the only way to approach it.
Nice. And it kind of leads me into like discussing your philosophy and training and principles, but that ability to maintain that learning or that desire to improve or grow. I think there's something that happens in a fire career where you get there and you've arrived and you're there, and then that spark goes away, and whether it was your purpose or passion or you're just overloaded with the job, that we lose that. And I think one of the greatest ways to rebuild that or reconnect with that is fitness. It's typically a low barrier to entry, right? It just requires you to put in something. Everything's uphill, so if you want to get to the top of the hill, you have to work. And I think this is a great opportunity for you to introduce Firehouse Strength and Conditioning. Do you mind give us a quick rundown of what that is to you and kind of how you got involved with this? Because it's been around for some time and it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Firehouse Strength and Conditioning. It's funny because that was never the goal or the intent. Right. My buddy Frank and I, Frank owned a gym. So when I moved back to get on with the fire service, I had sold my gym and he's like, you come work at my gym. And so I worked at his gym for a long time and kind of been doing that. And we'd worked with a lot of firefighters. So when I got on the job and, he'd been already like a captain for, 10 plus years, we just started getting phone calls of like, hey, can you help us with our academy, right? Or can you come give our people a class with this? And so, that's kind of where it started. And we had departments calling us. We would go do 1, 2, 3 day workshops, seminars, building. And the goal was to train their training division. We would write their like recruit academy PT. Okay. We would train their people, basically, you call it a train the trainer or whatever, with the intent that like, basically you won't need us. And so we would go do these and I kept getting the same questions at the end every time. I'd spend 2-3 days with these people and I would stand up on the whiteboard and deliver lectures on exercise science and physiology. And basically I'm going to just teach you everything I think you need to know. Here's the program. And, at the end of it, they always asked, that looks like a lot of work. How much to just pay you to like do the programming? And every time I was just like, well, why didn't you just ask that in the beginning? It's like, you mean after the 2 or 3 days, like you don't want to, it's like, so after enough of this, I'm like, all right, here's what I'm going to do. I found a platform and I was like, I'm going to upload what I do for my training and what I recommend to people. Cause that was always a question I got. Man, what do you do? And I'm like, this is what I do. And they're like, oh, what would you recommend for a firefighter? It's like, well, that's what I do. This is, and so that's kind of how the origin story of Firehouse
Yeah.
Strength and Conditioning. And I was just putting up the programming that I do for the job is designed specifically for firefighters. We have minimal equipment, so I needed a program that was accessible when I was at work, right, with the equipment that I had available there. Also, it needed to be like reasonable. Like I have spent a lifetime training in a gym 2 to 3 hours a day for like years.
Right.
And like I'm done with that, man. Like I don't need to do that. And so when it came to training for the job, it's like I need something that is effective, minimal equipment I can do on minimal sleep, and I can get interrupted, you know? And so that's kind of formed the foundation of it. And then when it came to putting it out there, I was like, I really want this to be a minimal barrier to entry. Funds for firefighters and fire departments. It's like, I want this thing to be, I don't want the price of it to be something that holds back like a firefighter from reclaiming their fitness and being able to train for the job.
Right.
And so it was like, look, I'm just going to make it like a Netflix subscription. It's like $20 a month. I'm not out to really make money on this thing. I get asked enough, like, what do you do? I just point, I'm like, here it is. And at $20 a month, it's like, have at it. So that's where Firehouse Strength and Conditioning kind of came from and where it's at. So
could you kind of elaborate on maybe just your core principles of your philosophy when it comes to training like a firefighter?
Yeah. So, there is an aspect of specificity, right? So whether you're a professional snowboarder or ice hockey, like there is an aspect of specificity to whatever your sport or occupation is, right? So Firehouse Strength and Conditioning and the principles is one that it is specific to the job in that aspect of we need a few things. We need maximal strength. And this is kind of where we can talk about the conjugate system and how well it works. But when it comes to lifting a patient off the ground, and I don't know, I mean, they're getting heavier and heavier.
They sure are.
So we'll just say like a typical, like when it comes to lifting a 400-pound person off the floor, like that's not something that you're doing for reps. I mean, I hope not, right? Like you need the ability to organize yourself in a way that is safe, efficient, and effective to lift that person up, whether it's just off the ground or onto a gurney without injuring them or yourself. And that requires maximal strength, right? That's a one-time thing. And there's a lot of aspects of the job that require maximal strength. And then, lifting a maximal weight. And then on the other side of things is kind of the explosive power. So there's a lot of things that we need to do that requires, maximal amount of force as quickly as possible. Whether, easy one is forcible entry, right? Is the impulse that you can give that door. But, when it comes to making a push down a hallway or throwing a ladder, like these things require a special strength. And what it looks like is this, continuum of, it's a force velocity curve where velocity very low, the force is very high, and vice versa. When velocity is high, force is low. Well, we want to train both aspects of that curve. So that, we have these capabilities to meet whatever the demands of the job. So when it comes to programming strength for Firehouse Strength and Conditioning, those things are taken into account. We want to develop those special strengths in conjunction with one another so that you're bringing all those tools to the table, right? So that's kind of hopefully a simple version of the strength side. And when it comes to conditioning, I've spent a long time in CrossFit gyms and coaching there and building work capacity. And when it comes to conditioning for the fire service, we're really looking at work capacity. And what is that, like work capacity? Really look at how much time do you have on a bottle? What are the types of movement patterns that you use while working on the fire ground, or, maybe it's an extrication or those things. And so when we think on the conditioning side of things, we're really trying to build work capacity and almost this like grunt work, kind of
Yeah.
ability. We need to have a strong and stable spine under load, under duress with high heart rates. And we need to be able to sustain that for, a bottle, two, three, and
Sure.
those, right? And so on the conditioning side of things, that's where we're really trying to to be specific about the energy systems that we
Okay.
train. You need to be able to go fast and hard, but you also need to be able to sustain,
Right.
right? So if you're going to be doing overhaul, or maybe you're working the fire line, it's like, well, you need to be able to go for a long time. So just being a sprinter isn't good enough. You need to be able to sustain and keep working. And we always look at it as, you don't want to be the guy who's low air alarm is the first to go
Right.
off, right? So like in my department, it's like when that bell starts ringing, everyone looks and it's like, okay, doesn't matter where you're at. It's like, it's time to go. And like, nobody wants to be that. So the goal is to build a work capacity so that you have the tools and the engine to get the work done that you need to without, coming up short or placing yourself or your crew or the citizens in danger. So
Absolutely.
hopefully that answers
No,
that
I think
question.
it does. And you actually, you mentioned two things: building capacity and then the demand of the job. And maybe we'll take a little left
Yeah.
turn here and dig into this, but capacity and demand. And we kind of talked about it briefly to start, but the fire service is a capacity to demand ratio. The job is going to be the job until forever. As we get older and decay, our capacity naturally diminishes, right? Unless we're leaning into that, trying to maintain that. And you've said that
Sure.
a handful of times. I've seen it on a lot of your social media stuff. Do you mind kind of digging into your thought process when we see capacity over demand, and just kind of share your thoughts on that?
Yeah. The capacity over demand, I actually got that. So I was at a seminar with Gus of Westside Barbell, and at one point during one of his lectures, he just wrote up capacity greater than
Yeah.
demand. And I remember when I saw that, it was like that's it. I'm not clever, and so I'm not able to come up with those things. And I just remember seeing that, and it was like, dude, Gus, like that's
Right.
it. And so that really became a thing after talking to him that really simplified really the goal of Firehouse Strength and
Yeah.
Conditioning, and really any aspect like you're talking about. And so the goal is that your capacity always exceeds the demands of the fireground,
Always.
right? And the reason that is one, we're seeing this, what's one of the major, if not the major killer of firefighters,
Right.
right? Like sudden cardiac
Exactly.
events. What causes that, right? Demand exceeded the capacity of the
Right.
heart, right?
Simple.
And then when you like, yeah. And then when you look at the injuries that are sustained on the fire ground, it really is like an injury, whether it is a bone, soft tissue, ligament, like these things, like those happen when the demand exceeds the capacity of whatever that
Right.
is. And so it's very simple when it comes to our training. We want our capacity to always exceed demand so that we don't get injured, we don't die.
Right.
All right. We're able to meet the demands and serve the citizens on the day that they called. And so that's a very easy way and way to kind of sum things up. And then over time, you mentioned it, as we age, like the reality is like these things are just going to decline.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's father time. And so, the real goal is to push yourself, and it's a continuum,
Right.
barring like a catastrophic injury or disease. Like no one just one day wakes up and they've lost all physical abilities naturally, right? Disease, injury, those things can do that. But for most, it is a slow decline over
Mm-hmm.
time. So our goal is to push ourselves so far to the end of the continuum that over the career, as those things naturally decline, you still exceed the demand of the fire grounds,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is such a hard thing to do, right? Like, I mean, you talk about the things that the fire service present. Man, this job is not healthy. I didn't get into this job, one, to get rich or to like live like super healthy, right? You just think about all the things that are stacked
Yeah.
against us.
Firefighting is not good
And
for
it
your
makes
health
it
or
very hard.
wellness.
Yeah. You make it very
Yeah,
hard. It makes it
it
very
can.
hard to to maintain these things. And so it's a career, it's a lifelong process of just trying to fight off that
Hmm.
decline. And I heard a song a while ago, and it was Toby Keith's "Don't Let the Old Man In."
Yeah. Yes.
And like capacity over demand, when I heard like that line, I was like that's
That's
it.
it.
Like why am I training? Why do I keep pushing these things? It's like, dude, I don't want to let the old man
Yeah.
in. I got 2 kids. I got a job that demands like everything of me. The day I stop trying to keep the old man from coming in, it's like, dude, that's when things get bad,
Hmm.
right? And so, yeah, man, you're just constantly pushing back, and over a career, that's a tough thing to do.
Yeah. I think I heard Clint Eastwood say something like that too, because he's got to be up there 80s, 90s, or I don't know exactly how old he is, but he takes that same mentality. Like he's not accepting that. He's pushing
Right.
back, and there used to be this number that I think it was found out to be made up, but firefighting takes 10 to 15 years off your life immediately, right? I think we debunked that. It sounds right. It seems to fit. Whether that's not accurate or not, I don't know. But fighting into that and taking those years back is what it means to build your capacity, right? And the
Yeah.
demand is such that it only gets harder, right? I don't see the fire
Right.
service finding ways to make itself easier, right? It's just, can we adapt? The job doesn't care if you're a man, a woman, short, tall, young, or old. The demand is the demand. If your heart's 65 years old or 25 years old, it's still going to push you. And if you have a surplus of capacity, you'll probably come out on the better side of that, barring anything outside of your control, major
Yeah.
catastrophes. And like you said, injury and illness. But there's just something about the mindset of people like you and that I try to embody, that it's part of what we do. It's not just, I'm going to work, I'm going to get through today, see what happens. And I don't bust my ass every day, but 90% of the time we're in the gym, right? We're doing it. What would you say is something that can help someone who's struggling to find that intrinsic or extrinsic motivation to start looking at the lifestyle they have and maybe evolving into one that is supported by strength and conditioning, or, find that again? How can we help people get that?
Yeah. For my simple approach to that is I would ask you, like, what are you willing to do? And so you made a comment there of like, I don't, not every day, you know, am I like all out or, bust my ass or those things, right?
Right.
Like you give it everything that you have available on that day. And sometimes that's like, man, I'm giving 100% of my 60%
Right.
because I haven't slept in 2 days. I've got a newborn. Maybe I just got a puppy that likes to get up every 30
Right.
minutes to pee on the carpet. And so the important aspect is like, on that day I'm going to bring everything that I have, and that might look like 100% of my 70%, right?
Yeah, I like that.
And then when it comes to like the fitness thing, is people get really caught up with, these big like challenges, especially, hey, we're coming up on New Year's. It's going to be the new year, new
Yeah,
me.
right.
And people are going to sign up for, some, a common one is going to be like, they're going to sign up for the Navy SEAL program. But yet they're a firefighter. And it's like, well, what? Like, that's designed for Navy SEALs.
Right.
It's not designed for firefighters, going to destroy you. And
Right.
anyways,
Good luck on your 15-mile ruck.
yeah, like the and so they go for it like 100% all in
Sure.
on this thing, way over the top. And then of course they don't last more than a week. Like, it's just not sustainable. And so, a better approach is like, what are you willing to do today? Especially if you've lost your
Mm-hmm.
fitness or lost your momentum. Is so many times I've got a garage gym and I will go in there and it's like, I just start with a warm up. I've got a warm
Mm-hmm.
up that I've been doing for years. It's the same thing I do every day. It takes 7 minutes, and it is a warm up that I've designed that works really well for me. And it's like, I don't know how many days I go in there. It's like, dude, just start
Right.
there. And then once I get warm, I'm like, oh, I feel pretty good. All right, what's the first thing on my program today? Main lift. It's like, all right, I can bench press today. Like, you
Yeah.
know, get in that. And then like all of a sudden you're starting to build up these small wins. And then after the bench press or whatever you're doing, it's like you throw it and you're like, man, I'm feeling
Right.
good.
Blood's flowing.
Now, 45 minutes later, you're like, dude, I just got in a killer
Yeah.
workout. Now, had I written that all up on the board, looked at it an hour before with the state that I was in, I'm like, yeah, no, I don't got that today. So I don't start. Versus if I just, man, I'm just going to start with a warm up. And some days that's literally riding 1 mile on the assault
Right.
bike, and it's like, dude, I'm just and for me, that's what it looks like on most days. Is that's how I get started.
Nice.
And so that would be my recommendation: is start with something you're willing to do. It doesn't have to be this Olympic caliber program. That might look like doing nickels and dimes, 5 pull-ups, 10 push-ups, maybe, on the hour, every hour for 10 hours of the day.
Sure.
You go to the station and, we did something a while back called basically a deck of calls. I'm sure you've done like a deck of cards workout. Yeah. So worked at a really busy station and the idea of having a standalone workout time was just, it was a dream and it would never happen. Right. So what I did is, we got a whiteboard, and on every call that we went on the way back, someone in the engine would just call out a movement and reps. Okay. And so it'd go by seniority. So the captain be like, all right, we just came back from a chest pain, right? It's like, what do you got, Cap? He's like, 10 air squats. It's like, okay. So we write 10 air squats up next to a chest pain on the whiteboard in the bay. When we got back from that call, we did 10 air squats as a crew, went inside. Next call comes out. We keep doing the same thing. Every call gets a new movement, reps, and everyone gets to figure out what it is. Well, okay, say another chest pain comes in. It's like, okay, we owe 10 air squats. Now you start rolling a few calls. You go out, I've got chest pain, I've got 2 falls, and we had a 1050. Well, you go to the board, and you're like, okay, we owe 5 pull-ups, we owe 20 air squats, and 10 burpees. Yeah. And it's like, that's what we were doing. And we do 4896s, and over a 48-hour tour, it's like you'd look up there and we got way more in than had we tried to get in like an hour in the gym, right? Mm-hmm. And then we had this weird thing. So we never slept through the night, which was always oh man, if I could just like sleep through the night, right? And we played a trick on ourselves where it was, okay, if we sleep through the night, mm-hmm. then you got to clear the board. So meaning that the next morning, if like we didn't get a call from like 10 to 6 a.m., we'd have to go out there and you do the whole board. And that one little thing turned it from like bitching about like not being able to sleep through the night to, God, I hope we don't sleep through the night. Like, dude, we get a call that would come in at like 5 a.m. and the crew would be like, yes, I did not want to do all that shit. And it was so funny. It was like, listen to us. Like last week we would have been bitching and moaning about mm-hmm. this. And now like, we hope we don't sleep through the night, and so it's a psychological thing, but it was just kind of funny. And we kind of just made it up on our own. And as we went, and it just stuck. And I was like, man, this works really well.
That's awesome.
And so sometimes it's just that. Instead of I have to go into the gym for 90 minutes uninterrupted. If I don't get in the entire workout, then I don't make any progress. It's like, it just doesn't work that way. And for the fire service, it's going to look more like getting in a few things between calls mm-hmm. than the actual like uninterrupted thing. At least that's the way it is in my world.
Yeah. So 2 things I want to touch on real quick. What is your down and dirty thoughts of 4896?
I think there's better.
Okay.
I think there's better out there. The 4896 at a busy house is brutal. Okay. I didn't really feel it until I had kids.
Okay.
And to come home after not sleeping for 2 nights, my wife is ready to, be off duty.
Right.
I walk through the door. I haven't slept for 2 nights. My wife also hasn't slept for 2 nights. She's ready to hand them over. And now I'm not in a good good place to be the best version of myself, right? Let alone, you know, I don't know how many times I've walked down a hallway on night 2 after like not sleeping, and I'm walking behind my driver who is like walking down the hall, leaning into the wall, and it's like that's the dude that's going to drive that rig. Dude. You know, it's like that's the guy getting behind the wheel. Imagine if you were leaving like a restaurant and you saw someone walking down the hall on the way to their car like that.
You'd stop them.
It'd be like no way. Like, give me your keys. But yet, with a 4896, any of these like long shifts, it's like that's the reality of it. So people make, you know, they get in accidents. They make mistakes on the fire ground. They make mistakes drawing up medication. You know, if you look at some of the studies, we've been doing studies here locally, but it's like, you know, the amount of Maydays that come in on day 2 versus day 1, right? So it's like, yeah, if we want to bang the drum about safety and, you know, everybody goes home, whatever the new thing is, and yet like still roll out the shift schedules that are like the worst things for our health, like it just doesn't match up. So now it's not as easy as just switching the schedule. I realize like there's a lot of aspects to it, but I think we could do better on that aspect. My department, like I would prefer if we did like a 24 on, 72 off.
Yeah, let's go.
When I look at schedules, I'm like, man, that looks pretty good. I'd like to give that one a try. And the people that I talk to that are rolling that are pretty happy with it. They are. You know, they're like, yeah, I can do one night knowing that I'm going to like go home the next day and be able to chill, you know, and recover. Where we get into trouble though is, you know, okay, so you get that 24/72 and now you pick up some overtime shifts. Maybe you're working a second job and it's like, we're giving you this time off to take care of yourself and you're going the other way with it. Right. So, you know, we can be better on our days off as well to maximize our recovery. So I know you asked for down and dirty, but I just gave you a long answer, that was my bad.
Solid. And just looking for more thought process there, because we considered it too at our department, right? It was brought up, it was talked about. It fell on its face. I don't know what happened with it, but it didn't even come to a vote, I don't think. The second thing I wanted to ask you was 7 for 7. Can you run us through that real quick, just for those guys looking for, hey, Eric does this thing, 7 for 7. He says it works. And maybe that's all most people need is to start with that warm up, and maybe that'll get them going somewhere, or like you mentioned.
Totally. So 7 for 7 is 7 movements for 7 minutes, and it's 20 seconds of each movement for 3 rounds. So it starts with jumping jacks. Then you go into a mountain climber, and this could be like, this is more of a mountain climber stretch. Then you go into push-ups. You go down on your belly for arm haulers. You flip over on your back for flutter kicks. You stand up, you do air squats, and then your 7th movement is just an up down. Okay. And so, I set a timer for 20 seconds, and I just rotate from one to the next. And it's not like going for high score. Sure. It's like, dude, I'm just moving, man. And sometimes it's like, that was my workout today, you know? Or maybe you just do that every couple of hours. And if you were to start tallying up the amount of movements and the things that you're getting, it's like, dude, we're making progress. Right. It's like, it's the 1% better mindset. Right. So 7 for 7, 20 seconds of each movement, 3 rounds, jumping jacks, mountain climbers, push-ups, arm haulers, flutter kicks, air squats, and up downs.
We will, we'll throw a video in the show notes of that if you don't mind. Just so people can check it out.
I'll send you. I've got a YouTube link to it, so I'll send that to you.
So if you're listening along and you're like, man, I need to try this, and you're not sure what any of those means, we'll have a good resource, link to the website, YouTube, all that stuff. We'll put that in there for you guys. So let's move out of the warm up a little bit, and if you don't mind, to expand on the conjugate, the technicalities of it, and the philosophy. And I'm super excited to learn about this, because I didn't know it existed until several months ago when I started following you. And I had followed some of the Westside Barbell stuff in the past for powerlifting, and I did a powerlifting meet. It was cool. I learned a lot. I've only done one, probably won't ever do another one, but super interesting. So introduce us to conjugate tactical.
Yeah. So we'll start kind of first talk about kind of what conjugate
Yeah.
is, because that's a huge like thing. And man, there are a lot of different definitions and
Okay.
opinions. However, the conjugate system, it works best to kind of compare and contrast it against, say, like a traditional periodization model. So like typical Western periodization is this idea of high volume, low intensity. So think, high reps, low
Right.
weight, and then over time, like the reps decrease and the weight
Okay.
increases. And so that's your like traditional
Like,
Western classic periodization
right.
model.
Progressive overload type
16
stuff.
weeks, that's it. And so you're just going along
Okay.
there, and you've got a start date and an end date. And the idea is that you peak at this end date, and that's it. Or you've got these kind of block periodizations where, you've got muscular endurance phase, then you've got a strength phase or a hypertrophy, and then you've got like power. And it's we're really training these specific blocks, which are fine for, say, classic like sport
Mm-hmm.
models or those things where it's like, okay, I've got in season and out
Right.
season and off season. These are specific dates that I need to peak for, or maybe I'm just a beginner novice, like just learning. Like there's nothing wrong with these traditional
Mm-hmm.
systems because they can serve depending on what the goals are and those things very well. However, those models do not work well for tactical populations. And we'll just say the fire service, for our example, because we don't have an off
Right.
season, right?
Right.
You don't know when your game is going to
Right.
be, right? Like at any given time, you need to be able to bring all of your traits to the table or to your field, the fire ground at
Mm-hmm.
once. You don't have, imagine you get a call coming, you're like, ooh, this, I'm in my endurance phase
Right.
right now. I'm not sure I'm going to be good on this one. You got a 400 pound. God, dude, I wish maybe I'll try that next round.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
When a lift assist comes in, I'm like, I just haven't been training for strength lately.
Right.
We'll have to dispatch another
I'm at
unit.
the endurance phase. I'm gonna hang out in the truck. Sorry, guys.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, oh no, you guys got that. I haven't lifted heavy in a
Right.
while. So like that just doesn't work for us. So you take something like the conjugate system, and the conjugate system is training, using multiple methods in conjunction with one another to train all or bring up all traits at the same time.
Gotcha.
Or, simultaneously, which works really well for our people. Is like, I want to be getting stronger. I also want to be developing explosive
Right.
power. I want the work capacity to go all out for 5 minutes. And I also need the engine to go for 20, 30 minutes or a few
Yeah.
hours on a major
Right.
incident. So the conjugate system, the way that is designed and the different methods you use, trains all of those traits at the same time.
Gotcha.
Now, if we, now we kind of go into the specificity of, say, conjugate tactical. The tactical side of things is we're really thinking about what movements are we using? What kind of work capacity? Would it make sense to do high rep gymnastics and pull-ups, or would it make more sense to maybe do like loaded carries? And we're doing stuff like farmer
Right.
carries. Maybe we're putting on a backpack and doing box step-ups. Hey, that looks a little bit more like my job than doing 100 pull-ups unbroken for time.
Right.
Right?
Butterfly.
Now, if yes, but hey, man, like if you are a competitive fitness athlete and that's your thing, then hey, I'd recommend doing that if that's your. But for us, right, it looks
Yeah.
different.
Specificity.
Doing stuff like planks, like really focusing on trunk stability, doing workouts in gear
Right.
because we know that imposes unique demands on us,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we have our work in the gym, and then we have our work on the apron
Yep.
or in the bay in our gear that kind of bridges the gap between our general fitness and the specific fitness that's required on the fire ground.
Question for you.
And so the conjugate, go for
Real
it.
quick. So we're talking about gear and we're talking about weight room. How do you feel professionally about when you see people putting on their SCBA and all their gear and getting on a rower or trying to do like those real specific movements like squats? And rowing's not very specific, but technical movements, squats, that type of stuff in gear. Would you rather they separate the two, or what's your thought there?
Okay, good question. So when it comes to movement patterns, so we think about like, would I put on my gear, SCBA, all of that, and do barbell back squats? I would not.
Wouldn't.
And my concern there is like, what are you trying to train? You put on your gear and all that stuff to train for the fire ground. So let's make that, like, that workout should look like the fire ground. And that should have movement patterns that are used on the fire ground, like squats, lunges, crawling. You do push-ups. It's like you're getting, when you're doing a search, like the push-ups, right? So step ups. So if we're in gear, that workout should look and kind of smell like the movements and things that we're doing on the fire ground.
Agreed.
Now, and I want to separate that, and then the specific work we do in the gym, I want you in shorts, t-shirt, whatever your gym attire is. I want you in a good shoes, because these lifts require technical like proficiency, right? And so I want you in an environment that sets you up to move perfectly, so that we can develop these capacities in these movement patterns, get you as strong as possible in these, build your capacity in these movement patterns using our traditional kind of weight room stuff, so that when we impose the demands of the fire ground, like our gear, speed, increased heart rate, like heat, that those movement patterns, like, don't degrade as fast. Gotcha. And if we only do workouts in gear, then we're always training basically at a below, say, like capacity. We're always imposing these demands. So like, can you maintain a good squat position? Well, you've never done it in gear. So how do you know? And so hopefully I'm answering this question is the importance of separating those two. Is I want the movement to look perfect in the gym, so that when we put the gear on, it will hold up better when we put those demands on you.
Yeah. So I see it.
Yeah. I don't think you
good.
Go for it.
Because I think what you're saying, if I understand correctly, is like in the gym, right? We're shooting for that bullseye when it comes to patterns, right? Yes. And the more bullseyes we can get in the gym when it comes to movement patterns, the better we're going to be able to function outside in our other field of context, our fire ground, even though we're only hitting 8 ring, right? We're hitting the 8 ring, but we know we can maintain that because that demand is challenging our capacity. And we understand technically that anytime we put anything on our body, load carriage, it's going to reduce our range of motion. It's going to make us heavier and slower. We're putting on breathing apparatus. We're not breathing efficiently. So we're already behind the 8 ball, but we've done so well in the gym that we have this capacity. Let's say 100% is great, but you work so hard, you've got 120% capacity. And now you're only coming down to the 98 when you go on the fire ground, right? Is that kind of tracking?
Yeah. And man, I love the use of the target kind of analogy, and you couldn't be more correct there. So you're right, that traditional gym setting, those things, we are working on accuracy and we're doing our best to hit the bullseye, so that when we impose those demands, it's like we still stay in a close bunch, right? Because we don't want to deviate so far that now like we get injured. Right. And we want to create this buffer that, we can bend a little bit on the fire ground because we move perfectly and we've trained our capacity in these full ranges of motion and those things, so that when those demands get imposed on you, you can bend a little bit and you're like, I'm good here. And that you're always trying to fight to get back to a good position. Right. But if we don't train that way, then you just don't have that buffer. And you're rolling the dice, especially we start adding in sleep deprivation, hydration, all of the things that our job throws at us. It's like, man, I'm surprised more people don't get hurt, and I'm surprised more people aren't dying on the fire ground.
It's a very big surprise for sure. So let's get back onto the conjugate tactical. So we were talking about, having the two options. We're in the gym, and then we're in our gear, right? And you were getting into the specifics of kind of how it looks for you outside the gym, but in our gear.
Yeah. So, so do you want like gear workouts?
So I'm really glad that you are a proponent of wearing your gear to work out, because avoiding wearing your gear is only doing you a disservice, in my opinion. If you're not good in your gear and you don't ever wear it, how are you going to operate?
Yep.
PFAS and all that stuff aside, again, this job isn't made to keep us functioning healthy. It's the demand is what it is. It just is. So just maybe kind of talk about how, like, we know what we're doing in the gym a little bit. We're lifting heavy, we're lifting fast, right? But how are people,
Yep.
how do we want to develop a workout that replicates the demands of the fireground safely? And what does that look like for individuals who are like, man, if I work out hard here and we take a call, I'm punching out. Like, I got
Yeah.
nothing. And I understand those people.
Yeah.
I don't want to call them a liability, but they're the ones who need the training. But how do we support them while we build that crew continuity, or we build that trust amongst the crew? I don't want to smoke my guy because I need him, but I'm going to work hard.
Yeah.
How do we do that?
Yeah. Okay. So you've got a few things here, and this is all really good. So let's talk about, say, like conditioning in the
Okay,
gym.
let's start
So
there.
here, we're in our shorts, t-shirt, like, all right. So the goal, to sum up strength and conditioning, strength is the heavy stuff, conditioning is the sweaty
Got it.
stuff. All right. So conditioning, all right. We want to get our heart rate up. We want to take our body through certain ranges of motion, right? And we want to sustain the highest amount of output that we can. We want to train at this threshold so that that threshold gets higher, right? So, a simple workout that I might do, say, in the station might be like an assault bike, some kettlebell swings, and some push-ups or some air squats,
Sure.
right? Like, these are just real basic movements. I'm taking my body through full ranges of motion. I've got my heart rate up, and my goal is to really maintain good position as fatigue increases, because I want that capacity on the fire
Mm-hmm.
ground, right? So we're kind of creating this threshold with real general basic
Mm-hmm.
movements, elevated heart rate in an ideal environment that's kind of reduced our risk of injury.
Sure.
We're able to move perfectly in those things. So that might be a traditional, like, conditioning in the gym.
Cool.
Now to go out now in gear, all right, I want to get my heart rate up, and I want you to think about, like, what does it feel like on the fire ground? Where am I going on that as far as intensity wise? And what movements am I doing? And I want it to look and smell like the fire ground, or maybe taste. And so I put my gear on. Okay, I'm gonna get a ladder out. If I've got a tire, we have sleds. I think sleds, like, if you want to get a piece of equipment for your station, I think sleds are one of the best investments you could do. And we'll load up a sled. We've got a ladder out there and maybe a
Yeah.
tire. And my crew and I will just rotate. It's like someone pushes the sled down and back, and that's got a moderate amount of weight on it. It's like, hey, can everyone push
Sure.
this? And it's like, oh, it's easy for you and hard for him. It's like, okay, beast mode over here. You're going to push that for 200
Right.
feet down and back. Like, believe me, you're going to feel
Yeah.
that. And then you that this is challenging for, I just want you to go 50 feet down
Perfect.
and back. And so now we haven't changed the weight. But we've created a threshold for both
Right.
of them. And then the tire, that can just be a flathead axe. I'm just chopping on that thing. And then the ladder, I'm just picking it up off the ground. 24-foot extension ladder. I'm going to pick it up. I'm going to get it into my high shoulder. I'm going to throw it against the building. I'm going to raise, lower, bring it down, all under control. And so what I've done is I've elevated my
Yep.
heart rate. My gear is imposing the demands on me. And then I've also added in some technical proficiency.
Yes.
So when I bend over to pick up that ladder, I'm using a hinge pattern that I have made very robust by doing deadlifts. So my hinge pattern is good because of the work I've done there. So now when I bend over, tired, sweaty, heart rate going up to pick up a
Yeah.
ladder, it's like that position holds up. I get it to my shoulder. I did that using a technique very similar to the one that I use in the gym when I power
Right.
clean things
Right.
from the ground to the shoulder. Now, I train that in the gym. That position holds up. Now, when I pick up the ladder, right, like you
Right.
see
We
the
got a
blend
push
here.
press coming yet. And what I'm hearing is we need to, and I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm hearing you have to pay attention to what you do in the gym, because if the carryover doesn't carry over to the fire ground, you need to really consider not whether
Yeah.
it's worth investing in. and taking that risk doing it in the
Right.
gym, right? Like, just like you said,
Yeah.
we're getting that deadlift, we're hitting the bullseye. We're deadlifting 15,
Yes.
225, whatever that looks like for you. That, and then we're going out and doing it in the fire ground on the apron with the ladder, with the pack, all our gear. It might not be that bullseye that we're
Yeah.
looking for because we've got those demands showing up, but we're strong within that
Right.
movement pattern, like you said. So yeah, that makes perfect sense.
We're still getting on
Right.
target, you
Yep.
know, it's
Yeah,
closer,
it's much
right?
closer.
And so now, you know, raise that
Mhm.
ladder, and we just, everyone, you can be on air. It's like, depending who your
Sure.
crew is, I might have one guy in just a turnout
Right.
coat. Because for whatever reason, it's like, we'll just maybe use the example of, okay, maybe I've got one guy that's just like, I don't work out in gear. It'll kill me and give me
Right.
cancer.
Sure. Standard.
We're gonna leave that conversation
Understood.
alone. We're gonna use him as an example and just say, okay, well, why don't do you want to just still do the workout in your like comfortable gym equipment with us, or gym like attire
Right.
with us? And if that is what will get him into the workout for us, that's a
Sure.
win. Where we lose is if we create this environment that's like, no, you have to be in gear, like you have to, all these
Yeah.
things. And the guy's just like, yeah, I hate that, so I'm not going to work
Right.
out. Now we lost him. So, okay, man, like, what are you willing to do today?
Right.
He's like, okay, I'll put on my brush coat
Sure.
so that the ladder doesn't like hurt. And it's like, sweet,
Let's
man.
go.
That's awesome.
Every
Okay.
gloves,
And
clear helmet on.
then,
Let's do it.
you know, beauty. So now that guy's rolling with us. And then we might be on air, and it's just like, hey, we're going to go until one of us hits like a low air alarm. And then whoever hits the low air alarm, that's going to be the end of the workout for us. And then whoever that person is, I want you to call or go through your emergency procedures and call a mayday. And then the other two will come over, package you, and we'll move you to like safe refuge.
Nice.
And it's like, and that's it. And so that workout maybe takes 10, 15 minutes, or you get, you know, whatever, 20
whatever.
minutes, but you start working hard, you burn a bottle, and, you know, and then we've tied in some real job specific things.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, we always just like to finish with like the, you know, the emergency procedures. You know, you're going to lay down, call your mayday. And something we stress there is call in like a real mayday. So, you know, when I have people come and work with me and we do this, it's like, I don't want you to call your, like, everyone's got a canned mayday. It's like wherever they are, they call the same mayday.
Right.
My problem with that is if they ever found themselves in a mayday
They're going to
situation,
say it.
what do you think they're going to
Yeah,
call?
they're going to call that
the
practice
likelihood?
one over and over and over.
Because they've done it. So I really stress, it's like wherever you're at, just call like a real mayday. Like take a look around. Go, okay, it's Firefighter Haskins. I'm down Charlie side of Station 6. My low air alarm's going off. I'm going to self-rescue, heading to this door, activate the RIT team. I'll sound my pad. Like whatever your procedure
Yeah, for
is.
sure.
But sometimes it's like, hey, it's sunny and 60. Life is good. Like, no emergency here. Leave me alone. Get me a drink of water. Like, okay, that's it. But the idea is to really think about your surroundings and what's going on instead of creating some of those training scars. So, anyways, that's kind of what a gear workout might look like.
Beautiful.
For us.
I think.
And then
go ahead, go.
And then you know, you asked about like intensity, right? Like about the guy, like, you know, I don't want to kill myself in the gym, right? I'm on duty. My workouts on duty look different intensity wise than they do off duty. So when I'm off duty, like some of those conditioning pieces, those are the days that you might catch me like laying on my back, like, oh man, I shouldn't have ate before this workout. Like I feel sick, right? And that's okay because the consequences are very low, other than possibly puking on your garage floor. That's going to be about as bad as it gets. But when it comes to conditioning on duty, you know, to steal a phrase from my buddy Frank, is he always said, he's like, you got to save some for the citizens. And so we think about, and something we would do in a lot of our seminars is we'll do a conditioning workout and then stop them in the middle of the workout and just say, hey, quick show of hands, who could go on a fire right now? And Some people raise their hands and some people go, oh, fuck, like I couldn't.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay. So I want you to gauge back now and think about how you tack this workout, knowing that in a moment's notice you could get interrupted and that you need to be able to
Yeah.
respond. And so that's important. So when we do conditioning at work, we save some for the citizens. And the physiological or the break that I'm using is periodically throughout that workout, I'm going, could I respond right now? And if I catch myself like really like
In a hole.
starting to mouth breathe and things are getting gnarly, it's like I got to pump the brakes a little bit. And sometimes we look at each other and it's like, hey bro, like dial it down, man. And they're like, oh, I'm going for it. It's like, yeah, but you got snot coming out of your nose, man. Like, it's okay. Today's not the day to win the YouTube Olympics, man. Like, it's all good.
You're red, you're dizzy.
Yeah.
Take a breather.
Yeah.
I get it.
So that's how we really look at the intensity on duty versus off duty.
Perfect. That there's so much there. And I appreciate your philosophy on getting on the gear, wearing whatever level of kit serves you for that moment, that day. What are you willing to do today, right? And then the tactical aspect or the technical aspect, I think, is so important because now we're combining stress, we're combining job-specific things that carry over to the real deal, right? Now today's the first time you've thrown a ladder. Well, you threw it 3 times in practice, working out. You've greased that groove. You're not worried about whether or not you can throw a ladder anymore, right? You know you're going to do it. And I like that. When you do the Mayday or you find yourself in a scenario where you need to report something, making up stuff is okay. And I think we're understanding the value of not doing that anymore. But we do the same thing. If you find yourself giving a Mayday call or something of that nature, don't make it up. Assess your scenario, assess your surroundings, situational awareness. Be real. Tell me you're on the bay floor. Tell me what you see, what you need. Don't make up something that you say all the time. I'm on the 2nd floor and you're on a driveway, right? Like, let's not lose our minds here.
There's been a collapse and I'm in the basement and activate the RIT team. Like I'm out of air and it's like, well, like actually, no, you're on the bay floor. The door is right there and you could crawl out 10 feet away into safety. Like that's what I want you to be able to recognize in that moment. Of like, still call your Mayday, but be like, I'll be headed towards the Charlie side looking to self-rescue. And it's like, go ahead and crawl. And now your goal, get over there before you run out of air. And it's like, and you can set those things up of like, you can have a task to do when your low air alarm hits. It's like, okay, when low air alarm hits, we're all going to switch to this task. And we have to get that task done before that person runs out of air. And so now we've just done some stress inoculation. It's like, like use your creativity. But I think where we're going is just like, don't create those training scars, man. That's dangerous.
Yeah, they definitely can be. So speaking of dangerous and stress inoculation, man, I've been excited to talk to you about this. You are a certified Georgia smoke diving graduate. And if I understand it correctly, you are the first one from Idaho to graduate. Super cool experience, I'm sure. Awesome achievement. Let's dig into that, man. Tell me, first off, what does it mean to be a Georgia smoke diver and what is the program for anybody who's not familiar?
Yeah, for a long time I've tried to figure out like an elevator like pitch, for lack of a better term for it, just because it's like, oh my God, how do I sum up, when I got back, you'd start talking and then they would just like look at you and walk away in the middle of it. And so, the Georgia smoke divers, trained in search and rescue, survivability, and making critical decisions in high stress environments. Perfect. Like that's it. And the program, when I first heard about it, I was in a place and I walked in a room. My buddy was talking about this Georgia smoke diver thing, and I was like, "Oh, what's that?" And he's like, "Dude, they're the Navy SEALs of the fire service." And I'm like, "Oh, it sounds rad! Like I want to sign up for that." Now, knowing what I know now, it's like that does an extreme disservice to the Navy SEALs. So like, let's not call it the Navy SEALs of the fire service. But I didn't really, and at that time, there wasn't a lot of social media on it. They just had this archaic website. And so I went, studied it, looked at it, and I was like, I think this is kind of what I'm looking for. I want realistic, training that is going to take me to the absolute edge of my capability. I want to learn something. And I also want to learn like where the edges of, I want to be tested,
Right.
right? Like I want to know what I'm made of. And I also want to like learn that about myself. And I'm looking for the hardest training available. And at that time, it was like, that looked like it. And so, I went down there. It's a 6-day course. It's got a very high attrition rate. It can be upwards of 75, 80% don't graduate. And, that is similar to like special operations and those things.
Right.
So I think that's probably where that whole Navy SEALs of the fire service thing comes from.
That 80% number.
They share they share, like the only thing they have in common is a high attrition rate, right? I had no idea what I was getting into. And by the end of the week, I walked away from that that was everything that I was looking for and more. And I was taken to the edge of my capabilities. I was put in positions that challenged me to harness and utilize everything that I had learned, like up to that point in the fire service, but even the mental skills and the training that I'd done in my previous like careers in life. It was like, I felt like it just harnessed everything. And there were evolutions in there that I thought for sure, I'm like, I may be going home. I'm not sure I can do this, but I'm going to like give it everything that I have. There was no tricks. There was no nothing. Relied on my training, my skill set. And then you come out the other end and you're like, wow, like I feel powerful and motivated. And it's like, man, I really like believe in myself, in my ability to overcome pretty much anything that you throw at me. So yeah, the program meant a lot. I learned a lot about myself. It was very difficult. And now, I have the honor of going back and being able to help instruct and serve there each year for class. And so I think that's an important aspect of the only people there that are instructing or assisting are previous graduates. And what's cool about that is I remember, I had failed in evolution and I was getting some coaching and counseling, and I was looking at this kind of guy. I was like, he was older, probably maybe lost his fitness a little bit, right? But I'm looking at him and I'm like, well, you've done this. And so you have these people there training you that have actually done the thing they're trying to get you to do. And unfortunately, like that's not super common in the fire service.
Agreed.
Like I've been to a lot of classes where people are teaching techniques that they've never done. They've never done in real life.
No competency.
Or, it's just theory. Or it's like, sometimes it's like, okay, like that sounds awesome. Why don't you show me how to do that? And then it's like they can't do it, right? And so, I think that's a really unique aspect about that program, is being able to just look at the people around you and it's like, if they could do it, I can do it. So
what would you say so I've got some guys I work with and myself included, what do we need to do to start? Obviously sign up, pick a day. What are 3 things that somebody should really get squared away before they commit to this? Maybe commit first and then get it dialed in so you got your ass in the line. But
yeah. Okay. One, I would first start by like defining your reason why. Like, why do you want to go do that? And everyone's why is different. And that's good. I would encourage people that are interested to really define that, write it down. And it should be something that is very like intrinsic versus the external motivation. Like there's a lot of people that like, because of the notoriety that it's gotten as like the hardest training in the fire service and those things, now there are people that just want to go accomplish it like a go ruck or like a Spartan race. It's like they want to get their
their trophy,
right? And they just and those people don't stand a chance. I see them come every class, and they're typically the same people that talk about it on social media, and they're like, "Oh, I'm training for this. Watch me, blah 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 blah." And it's like, see ya, man. Like, because when things get hard, and they will get hard very quickly, like that's not enough,
right,
to motivate them to keep going. they quickly learn and decide. They go, okay, no, this isn't for
Right.
me.
I don't need to prove this to them.
Yeah. But then on their way out the door, especially after they get home, they've got a different narrative of like, oh man, I got screwed. They did
Sure.
this to me. It's like, it's interesting. It didn't, that's not how it went down. But so you've got that. And so I would really start to find your why you want to do it.
Right.
Hopefully it comes from something that would mean a lot to you.
Yeah. And that,
Because you're going to need that to get you
mhm.
through when things get really hard. And something that helped me was the thousands of miles between me in Georgia and at home,
Yeah.
and the amount of money that I spent to go do it. And when I was there feeling sorry for myself, it's like it was going to be very difficult for me to just like go home. And there were my family and people, you know, that I wanted to be proud of
Yeah.
me and those things and my reasons why. It's just like, yeah, the thought of quitting or not succeeding like wasn't an
Hmm.
option. But I think you see people that are close, especially local, it's very easy for them to quit because it's
Right.
like, hey, I've got a warm bed like 30 minutes away
Yeah.
from here, man. Like, you know, the PT instructors may or may not use like certain technique to get you to think about that, you know, and want to go home. I can neither confirm nor deny that. But
Right. Heads up.
so, anyways, I've kind of belabored that. So we start with your why. And once you've got that, then, you know, you really need to start your physical training. And I would say, like, don't sign up until you're ready.
Okay.
And for most people, that could be 6 months to a year of really focused training. And that focused training should be really focusing on your gear workouts and those things. You need to be very comfortable working in your gear, working for multiple cycles on a bottle. Um, like as far as like technical proficiency, as far as like, you know, what is the firefighter skill set that I have to
Right.
have? It's like you don't have to be some like
Guru.
advanced, like, yeah, that knows all the nozzle techniques or the fancy extra like forcible entry stuff. It's like it is bread and butter fireman
Cool.
work. They're very intense. The intensity is high, and the expectation or the standard is even higher. And so getting really good in your gear. And then, you know, beyond that, it's going to be training, you know, more physical fitness side of things, especially like body weight calisthenics and that
Yeah.
stuff. And putting in the time, man, 6 to 12 months is really, I think, what it'll take most people to be able to, you know, have the capacity to meet the
There it
demands of
is.
what's going to be asked of you down there, you
Yeah.
know?
For real.
And for some that may look like many, and this is where people struggle is they go, well, I'm doing CrossFit or I'm training for a half marathon, like whatever their thing is that they really like to
Hmm.
do. And where people struggle is they don't want to give that up. It's like, well, I train a certain way. You know,
Right.
I lift weights twice a week. I do Zumba for 3 days a week, and then I do, I don't know, underwater basket weaving for like this is my training schedule, and it's perfect for me.
I bet that has
And
a
it's like
ton of
that's great.
carryover too.
It's like, man, I don't know if that'll be
Right.
successful down in Georgia. And if it is, like, awesome, man, like, let's start putting out a Georgia smoke diver program with lifting weights,
Yeah.
Zumba, and underwater basket weaving.
Basket weaving,
That thing would be awesome. But, you know, your training has to be very specific for
as
it.
we've discussed.
And that might mean that you have to sacrifice some of the things that you really enjoy
Mhm.
doing because your ultimate goal is graduating from smoke diver program. And that's a hard thing for people to get
Mhm.
over. But know that it's like you can go right back to all those things when you graduate.
Right.
You'll have a giant smile on your face and you're like, dude, that was amazing. I don't think I'm ever going to do a push up or an up down in gear for a long, long
Yeah.
time. And it's like, cool, like totally fine. And, you know, kind of use the reference to Navy SEALs shouldn't be there. But if I work with people for selection, you know, I do personal training and do some stuff,
Yeah.
private training, and people will want to go to like say buds. And so if I'm training someone for buds, they have a very similar obstacle
Mhm.
there where they want to, you know, lift weights. They want to do all these things. Hey, I've got this soft program that I got. And it's like, okay, well, if your goal is to graduate buds, like here, like, or, you know, before you even get there, it's like, what are the minimum standards for the PST? Like, if you even want to like get entrance into the program, you're going to have to be a good swimmer. You're going to have to be able to run,
A lot.
and you're going to need pull-ups, push-ups, sit-ups. It's like, so we're going to develop those aspects. We're going to put all of our resources into that so that you can at least get an invite to the
Right.
party.
Right.
Because if you can't do those things, like all that other shit doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
You never get to use it. And so I use that reference. It's very much the same. It's like people start thinking way farther ahead. It's like, actually, no, you just need to really focus on a couple of these simple things. If you get really good at them, you'll be successful. And that's a challenge for people, you know?
Yeah. I've noticed that in my experience and with people I've come in contact with, and myself included sometimes, but we favor those high-end skills, those technical skills that are few and far between, but they're so flashy or fancy that they've garnered all this attention, where, and you said it a minute ago, but when we can perform the basics, well, we're good. You know, but when we can perform the basics at a high intensity under a time compression and high demands or high standards, now we're doing something, right? We're really leaning into our job specific tasks. And I think that's something that I'm going to probably take from this episode, but mastering the basics and then being able to perform them under time compressed high standards is probably going to garner more than doing the basics every so often and then really just getting those special one-off fancy technical skills, I think is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And that, you know, if I have a philosophy, is trying to constantly simplify, constantly trying to strip away what's unnecessary and keep only what's needed. You know, I mentioned I used to train for 2-3 hours a day, every day. And now it's like, I've got 2 kids. I'm so short on time because I want to be doing other things. I want to be spending time with my family. I want to be doing some of the other things that are really important. Now my fitness and my capacity are important. So like, how do I design a program to have the highest return on my investment? And so that's what I'm constantly trying to do. And that's what doing with Firehouse is really, that program continues to evolve as I strip away what is unnecessary and keep what is working. And when it comes to the basics, and I forget who I heard this from, but they said this line, I wrote it down. It's like, you know, we practice the basics until they become advanced. Yeah. And so that's really what I think about, is just like, man, you just get so good at these that you become advanced at them. And, you know, I have a short story about this. I was training a guy for the Olympics, and he was a phenomenal athlete. He'd been given programs that were super, super fancy and all this. And he reached out and he's like, hey, you know, need help, you know, going to go competing in Sochi. And would you do the strength and conditioning for me? I said, no problem. And so we talked about what he'd been doing. And then I started working with him and writing him a program. And what I learned, and over time working with him, is that there were things that he liked to do, and that there were things that he didn't like to do. And the stuff that he liked to do was kind of the fancy, like flashy stuff, right? Because it's cool, like, you know, like
something
makes you, like a lot of people are creating these programs that are really complicated, and oftentimes they're just trying to like flex their brain and say, look at how complicated I can make this program. Like it's the best in the world. And it's like, like, no, that doesn't work. Right. But that's often like the smoke and mirrors that people are using. And so what I found with him is through testing and time with him, is there were he had deficiencies that I really needed to fix. Right. And these were things that imagine that he wasn't very good at them and he didn't want to do them. And it was the thing that he needed
his
to do.
blind spot.
And so, so I had to couple those with the things that he liked to do. Okay. And so one of the things he loved to do was bench press, man. I mean, this dude is like, he wasn't going to miss a bench press day. And I'm sorry, but like bench press, my professional opinion, has very little carryover in snowboarding, right? It's like,
right.
However, the days that the stuff they really needed to do, I'd put bench press in there And then I'd check in with him, and he's like, dude, I knocked a bench press, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, awesome. But he did the thing that I needed him to do. And
Nice.
so, unbeknownst to him, I don't know, maybe he figured it out, but yeah, I just coupled the stuff that he didn't want to do with the stuff that he
Yeah.
did, and he never missed those
Nice.
days. And so that, and the things that he needed to work on were the basics. It wasn't the high technical or any of that. And, maybe we got lucky. He ended up winning 2 gold medals in the Olympics. And, he had a great career. I don't think it had anything to do with me. I think he was a good athlete, but that was the approach that I took with him. It was the focus on the basics. And to get him to do the boring stuff, I had to couple it with the stuff that he liked to do.
You gave him some icing on his cake. He need to eat the cake.
That's it.
That's
man.
cool.
It's like, dude, like, all right, you want to rip bicep curls? Like, okay, I'm going to do the bicep curls with this barbell complex. I need you to do that first, but you can finish with bicep curls. Go for it, dude.
Heck yeah.
I got it. Cool, man. As long as you do this thing, right on.
As long as you're putting in the effort and he's getting his benches that he likes and he's still hitting those weak spots or those things he need to shore up, I think that's a really good way to do it. Real quick, what does a day look like for you between balancing family, fire, service, and career, and then this coaching on the side?
Man. Like on duty or off duty, or
let's talk about on duty, because off duty that's a little bit more private, and that's that's your routine and stuff at home. So, but how does an on shift day look like for you when it comes to all of these demands, right?
Yeah. Well, for us, I'm fortunate. I've got a crew of just like pipe hitters that we all have a similar mindset of like what our values and what's important.
Nice.
So our shift typically looks like, we show up, we get our rig checks in, we see what we got on the schedule. We get together for a little cup of coffee, make sure we kind of know what we hope for the day, kind of what our intent is. If we need to go shopping for food, it's like we can do that. But really after getting the intent for the day and figuring out the schedule is we're going to try to get our workout in, like pretty much first thing as soon as possible, because as the day goes on, the likelihood of getting interrupted or as like, everyone is vying for your time, like the citizens get first choice, but just as things stack up, battalion calls, hey, I need you to do this. Right. And you're running and doing these things. So we found that to be successful, we try to get our workout in as soon as possible in the day.
What time do you guys start shift?
It sets the tone. 8 a.m.
Okay, so you're 8 a.m. What time are you working out by?
Hoping by 10.
Okay, cool. Good.
Yeah. And I'm trying to get in there earlier, and it's always like pushing these guys in there because they're like, oh, I can do this. I'm like, dude, like email, that can wait. At least this is my opinion.
Understood.
It's like, all right, did we do the necessary? Like we got the rig check, we got the pass down, we're good on equipment, we aren't low on anything. Are we in service and ready to roll? Cool. Does anybody need food? All right, you didn't eat. Let's get some food in you. And then what's our schedule for the day? Okay, we got it. Let's try to get that workout in. That's just the hardest thing. And it's often like, especially when it comes to fitness, it's often the first thing to go, right? Whether you're a firefighter or like, General Joe, it's always the first thing to go. And, I think that gets people just in a sticky situation. Anyways. And then, so we try to prioritize that up front. And it sets the tone. Everyone's got good energy for the rest of the day. And then there's also the stress of like trying to get a workout in sometime later in the day is gone. Yeah. And so that's kind of our priority. And then the rest of the day, we get a workout in the morning, and then we're training in the afternoon, hands-on, in gear, doing something. We've got a pretty rocking training division that typically always has something scheduled. But if we don't, then we're out in district doing something.
Nice. That's some awesome stuff, brother.
Yeah.
Well, that's
a good day.
Yeah, that sounds like a great day. And you got that 4896, so you get to do something on day two too. Yeah. So where can go ahead.
And then for me it's also like nighttime is, I do my best to stick to like a routine.
Yeah, for sure.
So like the bedtime that I have off duty, I try to hold when I'm on duty. And, I've done a lot of research, and there's a lot of this research coming out, sleep wake time variability and circadian rhythms. And it's just like the best thing you could do is try to maintain the same sleep and wake time. And so if I'm on duty, it's the same thing. I know I'm going to get woken up and those things. But the goal of that is so that when I come off duty, like routine and my circadian rhythm and those things are still in line so that first night back, I can really optimize my sleep and start that recovery process just as quickly as possible over a 4-day. Because I've noticed if I do something different at work, it carries right over into my 4-day, and it takes me 2 or 3 days to get back on, and I'll finally get a good night's sleep, and it's like, oh, you're going back to the station. And it's like, oh man, so I'm very much a fan of a routine and trying to maintain that the best I can.
I would double down on that. And anybody out there listening, guys, if we could inspire you to take all of your effort to build a sleep routine at home and make that work for you at home and prioritize sleep at home, and then bring everything you can from that home routine to work. What time you go to bed, what time you wake up, whether you have a fan on, you wear eye shade, you listen to white noise, you have things that smell, whatever it is. Try to match those routines as closely as possible from home, because that's where we have the most control, to work, where we're shooting for that bullseye at work, but we understand that we're not going to always be in that bullseye because it's out of our control. I think that, and like Eric said, that's going to give us the most opportunity to get the sleep that we can while we're on shift. And we know we're not granted sleep on shift. It's not ours to have, and we know that. But if you get it, oh man, at least you went to bed early and you got what you could. Yeah. What time do you normally go to bed?
I try to start kind of my routine by 9 and hopefully in bed by 10. Nice. Is kind of the thing. Lights out. So, I've got everything from like a hot shower to reading a little bit, try to avoid all the blue lights, the screen times and those things. I've got in this station I'm at now, there's a lot of like artificial lights in my room. Like there's a thermostat over here that's got a light that I've got tape on. And then there's like a smoke detector that's blinking. And it's like, so something I started doing was wearing like an eye mask. And man, did that make a difference at work.
Right.
But yeah, I think ideally, man, if I can be lights out by 10, that's good. And then, I wake up no matter what between like 4 and 6 a.m. If I can sleep till 6 a.m., that's awesome. It's typically going to be waking up by 4 or 5.
Nice.
So,
dude, that's awesome. So, brother, I really appreciate you making time to come on to our show today. We've had a lot of awesome discussion. Where can everybody get a hold of you and find you the best?
Easiest is probably through my Instagram.
Okay.
It's Firehouse C. So it's Firehouse_SC. And that's where Firehouse Strength and Conditioning is at. That's where, I get a lot of messages and I interact with a lot of people there. So that'd be a good place to reach out to me. There's the website, firehousestrengthandconditioning.com. That's a good landing page if you want information about kind of what we're doing with the program and those things. And yeah, I think that's probably it. Those would be the best ways.
Perfect. Well, Eric, I appreciate you coming on again. Like I said, this has been a very enlightening conversation, and there are gems throughout the last 90 minutes that we've just talked about. So again, I appreciate you coming on. It's been a pleasure. And everybody out there, thanks again for listening to Priority Traffic Podcast. See you on the next one. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Priority Traffic Podcast. We hope you gained valuable insights and some inspiration from our conversation with Eric Haskins. Remember, stay committed to your fitness journey and apply these practical tips to help you reach your goals. Be sure to follow us on all our social media platforms to stay updated on future episodes and content. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. You can visit High Performance Wellness Solutions at hpwellnesssolutions.com. And you can find all these episodes and more on PriorityTrafficPodcast.com. Thank you so much and have a great day.